beneath your knees. The birds like tender babies in your hand, and the old man playing Chinese checkers by the tree. Macarthur Park is melting.
It's Kristen Morgan. She did, and it's actually ceramic. It's a cast. It's a vase, really. It doesn't look like a vase. It doesn't look like a vase, but that's really ultimately what it is. It's unfired clay, and it's created to look distressed and decrepit. And I think it really harkens back to well, to my own life, because I really love cars and never having had one, but it obviously is very much part of LA. It's the car culture of LA, and it really relates to, related to Ed Kienholz's car piece, and there's something about the sense that the place itself, the city, has always been in a constant decay and rebirth. And obviously she's more interested in the decay part of it and the childhood, the sense of childhood, and which is also part of this. This is really a prop in a film that he made called Empire. It's the second film that he made of 3 so far, and this is I think this is from the Hotel Soubise, if I'm not wrong. It's the Rococo room from the Hotel Soubise, and it's in Paris, which is really one of the landmark Rococo pieces of architecture in the world, and it's an amazing recreation of it. And like everything he makes, it's perfectly detailed, perfectly remade. And it had a companion piece, which was Clement Greenberg's living room, which was made to the same scale. And if you look in there, you can see a hole cut out in the floor, and that hole is so that he could take his 16mm or 30mm camera into it and film. Sterling's work was, just as we were talking, a lot of Sterling's work is really sort of a frontal attack on minimalism in some way, and I think you can, and I like that. I like spirited art, and this is one of he did these series of pieces that are sort of conjure flames and decay and painting and abstract expressionism, and he's been going on this tack for a while.
But also geology too, and kind of like crystallization and
with crystals and with accumulation and with a lot of these things feel like they've been organic. He obviously there's a preference for the organic versus the man-made, and I think a lot of the criticism really comes from that point of view of it. What I loved about this piece, aside from the fact that I thought it was formally beautiful, was this kind of cartoony quality, which is something that at the time I was running the animation division at Disney, and and Disney Television, and obviously TV and the whole sort of synthetic media was something that I was very familiar with, and I saw that creeping more and more into art itself, that the generation of artists who were Jason's age were looking at objects in nature through a much more synthetic reality and it was the beginning of digital reality as well at that point, that the nature of reality itself was changing how people were perceiving it. And this, I thought, which is a very cartoony, you could imagine ants are sort of turned the picnic table upside down and they're carrying it away, and that's a very Yogi Bear kind of beehive. Very Yogi Bear.
My picnic baskets.
My picnic basket, boo-boo. So they were, and this is really what sort of set me off thinking about the whole idea of how artists were looking at reality and media in a different way, and it's really why the show was called Second Nature, was sort of thinking about that it was nature itself was being, which again is an LA theme, but it's that nature itself was being perceived at one more remove from nature. This is LA Days, which Liz Craft made, and I think it just speaks to all the things we just talked about. I think she and Jason were classmates, along with her husband, Pentti Monkanen, who's got a duck bike there. LA, there's a kind of humor in a lot of this work also, and in Jason's piece, and Pentti's and hers, and a sort of playfulness and a playing with pop culture and pop images, but also a very, very sophisticated formal vocabulary. You know,
and actually, graphically, if you guys read it, you can actually pull letters out. Lazy days or LA days?
Lazy, L-A-Z, D-A-Z-E. So
right.
it's an E,
and
right?
The Pac-Man type thing is eating the
E. The E, right. And but you know, abacus and sort of counting and you know, to Saul LeWitt as well, to minimalism. Again, you know, so sort of, a lot of these artists were sort of dealing with minimalism and the trying to find a way to get around it or make it meaningful make it meaningful again. This is Macarthur Park by Martin Kurcels, who is now teaches at Cal Arts, who, if you know him, is an enormous guy. He's both in height and width, and this is very much this thing which plays Martin singing Macarthur Park in a karaoke bar or in a karaoke room, which is really one of the sort of funniest and saddest things ever. And it's also a self-portrait, because if you look at that, that's really sort of a guy who's kind of lying on sort of a fat guy lying on his back and disintegrating, melting in the rain, just the way the cake melts in the rain. You know, this is another sort of puzzling thing that I bought that I couldn't ever figure out why I bought it, except that I found it really haunting when I first saw it. And, you know, it's in some ways I sort of think about it it clearly bears relationship to Jeff Koons and to Charlie Ray, and you can see a lot of artists work in there, but there's also something that there's nothing, there's no quotations around this piece exactly. This is even though it looks very much like a piece of Meissen china, you know, and it's very much a direct attempt to make a realistic sculpture of a lioness, and there's a real kind of beauty and solemnity to it that I really liked. I didn't think that there was any. It's like she was trying to strip away layers and layers of conceptual art history when she was making it, and try to get to something more pure about the sculpture itself. This is Matt Johnson, who went to UCLA, and this is a piece of origami, but life-size. He took a tarp that was like 30 feet by 30 feet, and then just folded it until it became a piano player playing a player piano, and that's all this is. It's taken from a book of origami, and it just cracked me up when I saw it, and I also sort of had a sharp intake of breath because I've never seen anything quite that insane. And you know, I mean, I just couldn't. Even now, I kind of go, wow, that is just really sick. And again, it's this amazing use of material, kind of a real lyrical sense and a great, you know, tremendous sense of humor, like all his work. Stephen Rose is one of the more recent acquisitions in the collection. He's a lot of his work deals with many things, among them his Southern heritage and lynching, and this work, which is part of a project called Recurrency, which he made, is based on an Ambrose Bierce short story. I can't remember which one, which is about a guy who gets hung and survives the hanging, and then ironically, a few years later, gets hung again. And this expresses a certain sense of futility about both the South, where he comes from, and about American history. But it's also just, and this is obviously a platform in which people were lynched. He uses his family, by the way, in a lot of these videos, I mean, you can see all the sort of the formal stuff, minimal, you know, and what he's dealing with. But in the end, it's just a very, very emotional very emotional piece. And when you look at it, it gets more and more emotional as well as the rope keeps cycling through and as the figure keeps dropping through the scaffolding. This is Evan Holloway. Again, it's sort of an early piece that we made, like 1996 or 97. And it's 2 columns that are lined with women's black stockings. And if you look inside, and they're speakers, they emit sound. But if you look inside, the actual mechanism of the speaker is made out of tomato cans and toilet paper holders. And what it's doing is it's playing Pachelbel's canon. And so it's taking this, a lot of his work is about sort of how culture, high culture especially, deteriorates over time. And this is really about the deterioration of Pachelbel's canon into, it just kind of sounds like some guy on a kazoo, ultimately. But I think it's sort of making the same point about minimalism as well and how these columns are functioning. And a lot of Evan's early work was sound work or interactive. And this one gave me particular pleasure. It was in my office for many, many years, and I would turn it on just to annoy people. And I still have to say I love seeing it. I love its sense of humor. And it brings, again, those same themes of deterioration of culture and of nature and of modernism into play. And so.